Right, so we've got our various motley assemblage of tools in the background, and here's our flow. So what we need to do now is turn our flow of flamethrower style fire into something that looks better than this. So what I'm going to do first is just hit F10, and I want to turn off the mental ray renderer. Simple reason being that if we're going to use afterburn, we're not going to use mental ray. They don't like each other very much. Okay, next over here I'm going to apply or add my afterburn to my scene. Now for this to work nicely, I want to add light to my scene, and I've got a couple of ways I can add light. So I'm going to stick a standard and let me see, a target direct. Let's move that in like so, and then just drag this up, making sure to check our hotspot and other parameters are okay. So there we go, just set these up under directional. There we go, so there's some lighting. Okay, now let's add our lighting to the scene, and let's add particles to the scene. There we go. So there's our particles, glam on, and there's our thing. Now I'm now going to click show in viewport, and here's our particles here. Now the first thing I'm going to want to do is make our particles larger over time. This is kind of, smoke's going to expand, flame expands, and so on. So what we're going to do is go down here first, and what we want to do is have a low value and a high value on our little spheres that are coming out here. So right click enable and crank up the high value, and you'll notice that over time nothing's happening. Well, what we need to do is go up here as well and just use the particle life start and end. And now if we go down to our scale, here we are, we can set a high and low value. So a high of 100 and a low of 15. So they're going to come out at this size 15 and they're going to end at size 100, which is nice and big. And over time, if we want to, we could squash them or make them less regular over time or whatever. And I might drop the regularity as well over time. There we are. Alright, we can also stick a slight variation, as you can see, so it's, the size isn't completely uniform over time. Now if I just hit render, what you're going to notice is that this is really, well, it just looks like, some cheap steam shooting out of something. It's not a fantastic effect yet. What we need to do is look at animation of the noise over time. So let's enable density and noise size. And the density of the noise over time, we'll give it a low of starting 5 and end of 12. And a noise size starting of 10 and ending on 22. Okay, now if we render, you'll notice it's much more broken up at the tops here. Yeah? It's a much nicer shape. We can also change other things here, but we're going to just keep it with that for the time being. Alright, now another thing I need to do is change the color of this, because we're not going to actually keep this plain white here. And whilst we can do things using the color here to change it over time, what I'm going to do is snap into keyless mode. I'm going to make it a plain grey. And then what I can do with this plain grey is apply an explosion daemon to it, which will add color on top of this. So let's just hit the old F9, and you can see now this is coming out, and this is our nice, simple, plain particle system without any special colors on. Okay, so we're going to be working with a daemon tool. So what I'm going to do is start workbenching. So I'm going to call this particle 1. That's my particle workbench. And what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to create a particle flow, an afterburn explosion. Just there. Okay, so it's pretty big, isn't it? Let's get rid of that, make it a bit smaller. That's ridiculously sized. There we go, just that big. Alright, now what we need to do is set some parameters up for this. Before we do it though, we need to add it into the scene. And before I add it into the scene, I'd like to turn this light on. So let's see. I'm going to turn on shadow map, take this down and put on afterburn shadow map. And then down here, under shadow parameters, I'm going to turn on atmospheric shadows. Now let's have a look at this. Let's get this in the middle here, hit F9. Okay, now you're not seeing much of a change here, but that's okay, we'll get to that soon. Now I need to add my daemon to this, so I'm going to click add, or pick rather. There we go. Right, so with our explode daemon added to this, what I need to go down to do now is look at the color in our daemon. Now here we have the actual color for the thing, and if I click it, we've got the gradient, which is what I was talking about earlier. Now what I want to do is change both ends of the gradient to black, because this is going to be additive. So we want to add this color to our original color. So there we go, these are going to be black. And we want to start our actual flame here, and here, end it here. Okay, so it's just going to be an intense part in the middle. Now for the actual middle of the flame, we want a very deep kind of dark red. So there you go. And for the beginning of our flame, we want a nice yellow. And for the end of our flame, we want a yellow. Okay, because this isn't actually a time span. This is just the actual shape of our flame. This is the actual color of our flame, rather, in the middle. And then here, I'm going to change it to a bit of a red. Same again here. Okay, just change this one because it's not quite right. Got too much green, not enough red. There we go. Check the middle one just in case I made that green without realizing. No, that's fine. Okay, so we've got this color going on here. Okay, and our daemon. And if you look actually at our daemon itself, there it is, you'll see that we've actually got that reflected here in this one as well. Now what we need to do is look at color shifting with age and multiply it with age. Now at the minute, if I'm just to render it and wait a second or two, you'll see, bam, fire. Beautiful. Just what we want. So let's change this so that with age it changes. So I'm going to right click, or just single click or whatever, because I want to enable this. And as you see, it's enabled over here, so I don't really need to. And then I'm going to enable this one as well. And let's change our multipliers. So at the start we'll have a multiplier of 0, and at the end a multiplier of 1. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that's a start. Now let's color shift with age. Let's put 3 at the start. And we want the color to go away by the end, so we'll make the multiplier at the beginning at 3, and at the end we'll keep it at 1. Just turn this off a moment. Okay, so I'm just going to mess around with the multiplier values. Let's move this window over to here, so that's out of my way. Now what I want to do is make it really, really bright on the left here. So what I'm doing is just cranking this up to round about 20 for the moment. Let's see how bright that is. Okay, that's quite bright at the start, and then at the end here we want to bring this down. So we've got 20 here. Let's end it at 1. Oops. Now if I enable this one over here, color key shift, enable, what I can then do is shift it between these various colors here. So there we go. So as you can see, the flame comes in and burns there, and then it's going to drop out round about there. And if I'm just messing about with the multiplier, just make it a bit darker at the end. So maybe I'll make this about 0.8. Then we've still got some flame going up in this. There we go. So as you can see, the smoke's starting to trail off it over time. And I can drop the multiplier down to about 10, make it a little bit less bright. Just really kind of faffing around with the values and the amounts there. Okay, that's not too bad. We can also change the scale and the amount and the perturbation. I can never pronounce that, to be quite honest though. So as you see, at the moment it's set at 0.5. We can pretty much jump that any way we want. I'll just keep mine at 0.5. Okay. Now over here, we don't need to limit the effect. We've got shadowing though, where we can make sure it receives shadows. If we just click that, and render it again. As you can see, shadows starting to gather underneath it. And it can also self-shadow itself if you want it to. There we are. And that gives a nice black kind of dense oily smoke coming off it. Obviously it's visible to the camera. We can change the shading on it if we want. Okay, that looks about right. And that's fine. Right then, so let's get in a bit closer to this so I can see it. And just check it midstream. Now if you want to get a slightly better effect on this, you're probably going to want to add a little bit of motion blur to it as well. I think I might brighten that a bit more as it comes out, because it could probably do with being a bit brighter. If I'm going to do that though, I'm going to want to change the what do you call it? The actual gradient ramp on this. So let's go back into it. Go back to afterburn. Get our explode demon. Right, so here's our color key shift and our multiplier. Let's just click on this, and this will give us our curve. And there we go. Just change that a little bit. Now if we do this, then hit F9. There we go. Okay, just close this off. And what else do we need to do over here? Well, there's our color key shift, which will do the same thing too. Okay, let's change that over time. Not bad, could probably do with bringing that back a little bit. Maybe like that. Yeah, that's better. That way it's still got flame, you see, inside the black greasy smoke that's going up. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, speed down here, and in the FBM fractal, which I'm using for the actual noise on this, I'm just going to increase the blur on it to about 2.5. Shouldn't see too much of a difference at this. It'll just kind of smooth the edges a little bit. That's better. Okay, that's fine. Cancel my render again. And what I'm going to do with this render is, well, I'm going to save it. Right, I just paused for a moment there in the actual recording, because what I've done is quickly set up a camera. And if I select my camera here, you can see I just made a multipass effect enabled on motion blur. This is just a simple thing, just to show you kind of how this is going to work. You can change the number of passes you got here and the duration in frames each way, which will show you. Now I'm not going to render it because it took about 6 minutes, but there you go. That's what it looks like when you hit render with what you've got already. So you can see it's spewing out the fire, which is gathering and flaming and turning into smoke, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So all in all, I call that, win. I'm quite happy with that. So now all we have to do is hide this, so hide selection, and I'm going to select my camera again and then delete it. And if I go over here and press camera 1, here is what it looks like. I think I should probably hide the particle flow group as well. Nah, I'll leave it on. Right, here is what it looks like now. Okay, so you can see where the flamethrower goes, and there you are. Okay, so that's the flame there. And if I just hit F9 quickly, I don't think the camera I've got here is set up for motion blur, thankfully. So just hit F9, and it'll just calculate our lights for us. And there should be ye big plume of smoke, basically travelling off to do whatever it is it's doing. Lovely big thick cloud, that is. Although it does take a moment or two to render, of course. Last frame took 4 minutes 4 seconds, I believe. So I'll just pause. Okay, so as you can see there, without the motion blur, it doesn't look quite as good, but you can see the flame at the bottom here and stuff. So with the dreadnought behind it, with this kind of layered over the top, it's going to look quite nice.